Camilla entered the trustees' chamber expecting a routine clarification. Instead, she was given a verdict that separated her permanently from the most emotionally powerful inheritance in the royal family. Before Charles could intervene, the chairman stated the decision in unmistakable terms. Diana's protected estate had been reserved exclusively for William's children. George, Charlotte, and Louis would inherit the legacy. Camilla would receive nothing, not a jewel, not a keepsake, and not a single ceremonial privilege. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The closed door changed everything. Camilla held herself still as Charles and William joined 3 senior trustees inside Windsor. The board was the independent group responsible for protecting Diana's private assets, while William's stewardship meant he would guard them until his children could receive them. Charles noticed the sealed folder first, and the king understood this meeting carried more weight than ceremony. The chairman opened it and confirmed the decision. Diana's protected estate included heirlooms, personal letters, jewelry rights, memorial assets, and a family fund. Every part belonged solely to Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. William would manage the inheritance, but he would never own it. The future king listened, and Camilla searched his face for surprise. Her composure broke. Camilla gripped the arm of her chair and asked whether a symbolic role remained for her. The chairman answered that the exclusion was absolute. She turned toward Charles, but the monarch removed his glasses and set them beside the folder. He wanted to defend her, yet challenging Diana's arrangements would reopen wounds the family had spent decades trying to contain. The chairman revealed the line that made the verdict irreversible. The instruction barred any spouse of Charles from controlling, accessing, presenting, or influencing the inheritance. The restriction did not merely block ownership. It prevented Diana's legacy from being folded into another royal household, regardless of its title. William said nothing, and that silence wounded Camilla more than the clause. She realized he had known the children were the beneficiaries, though he appeared shaken by how directly the instruction addressed his father's future wife. The prince admitted that he had received a briefing, but not the wording. Camilla rose before Charles could stop her. At the door, she faced William and asked, "How long have you known I was never meant to stand anywhere near it?" The trustees had delivered the legal verdict, but Camilla's final question transformed a private inheritance decision into something far more dangerous. A reckoning between the woman Diana had become in memory and the woman who had taken her place. The dispute was not truly about money. It was about belonging. For Camilla, exclusion from Diana's estate confirmed that there remained one part of the royal family she could never enter, regardless of title or loyalty. For William, the trustees' decision was not an insult to his stepmother, but a final act of protection for his children. Between them stood Charles, painfully aware that defending one woman's dignity could appear to diminish the memory of another. William carried that burden back to Windsor in silence. Catherine found him beside a locked presentation case prepared for George, Charlotte, and Louis, staring at it as though it contained more than objects. To him, the inheritance was the last untouched bridge between Diana and the grandchildren she never met. He wanted them to know her through letters, private keepsakes, and carefully preserved memories, not through arguments that had followed her name for years. Catherine understood the danger immediately. She asked whether protecting the estate might reopen wounds the family believed had finally closed. William admitted it might. The prince also revealed that the collection had never been divided by rank alone. Charlotte had been designated to receive Diana's handwritten reflections when she reached adulthood, because the trustees believed she might understand their emotional depth. George would one day guard the public and constitutional parts of the legacy, while Louis would receive material tied to his grandmother's humanitarian work. The arrangement carried love, but it also carried pressure. No child would control everything, and no branch of the family could reshape the story for its own comfort. Catherine heard the fear beneath William's resolve. He was not only protecting Diana, he was trying to prevent his children from inheriting the bitterness surrounding her. Charles faced a different pain. He found Camilla alone, still dressed from the trustees' meeting, her voice quieter than anger. She told him she had never expected Diana's possessions. What she had hoped for was a ceremonial role in preserving them, a sign that becoming queen had finally given her a place inside the family's shared history. Instead, the decision had shown her that her authority ended wherever Diana's private legacy began. The king tried to reassure her, but every word sounded weak. Camilla told him the crown had accepted her service, while memory had kept her outside. After Charles left, she removed a prepared speech from her desk and replaced it with a handwritten request for William directly. The inheritance had been designed to unite Diana's grandchildren around her memory, yet before the children could understand what had been preserved for them, Camilla prepared to challenge the one person determined to keep her outside it. The trustees had not reopened Diana's estate by accident. Their intervention began 6 months earlier, during a private memorial ceremony at Kensington Palace, where one seemingly courteous request changed the direction of everything. Camilla had asked whether a historic brooch associated with Diana could be included in a future exhibition overseen by the Queen's household. The room fell silent. William said nothing publicly, but one trustee immediately understood that the estate's boundaries were about to be tested. William had entered the Memorial Review, determined to keep the focus on Diana's humanitarian work. Catherine stayed close, aware that every object carried private grief as well as public meaning. Camilla arrived with palace curators and 2 estate trustees, including Eleanor Harcourt, whose duty was to protect the legal instructions governing the collection. The Queen's household meant the office supporting Camilla's official duties, while a supervising custodian would control how an item was presented and credited. Camilla paused beside an empty display stand and made the request that changed everything. She asked whether Diana's sapphire memorial brooch could appear temporarily under the Queen's ceremonial collection, with her office named as supervising custodian. Her tone was measured, careful. Yet William heard something else. The first step toward absorbing his mother's private legacy into another royal household. The prince asked the curators to leave. Catherine watched his hands tighten behind his back as he told Camilla that none of Diana's possessions would ever be reassigned. She answered that the proposal was meant to protect the late princess's memory, not replace it. William remained controlled. His reply cut deeply. Protection, he said, required boundaries. Camilla felt corrected in front of people whose respect mattered to her. She had offered cooperation and received a warning. Eleanor, however, heard something more dangerous than wounded pride. The trustee remembered an older sealed instruction referring to ceremonial reassignment, meaning the transfer of an object's symbolic control from one royal household to another. She requested an immediate legal review. That review uncovered more than expected. The estate was reserved for William's descendants, and Charles's present or future spouse was excluded from every custodial role. One question about a brooch had exposed the entire protective structure. After the Windsor announcement, Camilla learned through a documented trustee memorandum that her Kensington request had triggered the review. The discovery left her stunned. She had not merely been excluded, she had awakened the clause that made her exclusion permanent. One polite request at Kensington had awakened a restriction designed decades earlier, and once Camilla realized that her own words had brought the sealed clause back to life, she no longer wanted explanations from trustees. She wanted an answer from William himself. Camilla did not raise her voice when William entered the private drawing room. That made the encounter more dangerous. She stood beside the cold fireplace, holding the written verdict in one hand, and asked whether he had encouraged the trustees to exclude her. William closed the door himself. No aides remained. No courtiers could soften the language. For the first time, they were not future king and queen, but 2 people confronting the wound Diana's absence had left between them. Camilla had requested 10 uninterrupted minutes and refused Charles's offer to attend. She needed the answer to come from William without anyone translating it. She wanted no protection, no mediation, and no carefully chosen palace language. William accepted because he knew silence would only deepen the wound. The prince explained that he had not created the restriction and had no authority to rewrite it. His duty was stewardship, the temporary responsibility of guarding the estate until George, Charlotte, and Louis could receive their assigned portions. Camilla heard duty, but felt punishment. She asked whether his defense of Diana's legacy was also a way of reminding her that the family had never forgiven the past. Her composure finally cracked. She said she had spent years serving the crown, yet one private clause had proved that the institution could accept her title, while still treating her presence as an intrusion. William did not retreat. He told her the estate was the only inheritance his children could receive from a grandmother who had been denied the chance to know them. If Camilla's household gained authority, even symbolic authority, that bond would be blurred. To him, the boundary was not cruelty. It was protection. Camilla placed an earlier palace memorandum on the table. The summary showed that Charles had once considered a joint memorial board linking both households. A memorial board was a small body created to oversee how a person's legacy was preserved and presented. The proposal suggested that the king had believed cooperation was possible. William admitted the truth. Charles had raised the idea years before, and he had rejected it privately because the arrangement would have placed Diana's legacy beneath the sovereign's household. The future king said he could not allow his mother's story to become dependent on the authority of the marriage that followed her. Outside the room, Charles arrived just in time to hear William say, "My children will not inherit confusion about who their grandmother was." William's words ended the argument with Camilla, but Charles had heard enough to realize that the conflict was no longer about a sealed estate. It had become a judgment on how his own household had managed Diana's memory. Charles was sovereign, but sovereignty did not grant him ownership of every royal legacy. The trustees returned to Windsor, carrying the clause that placed Diana's estate beyond his personal authority. As the legal language was read aloud, the king recognized the cruelty of the position. He could protect Camilla emotionally, but he could not give her powers the estate had expressly denied. One signature from the past now carried more force than every title held in the present. Charles entered the briefing already knowing what William's final words had meant. The argument had moved beyond private resentment. It now questioned whether the sovereign's household had ever understood the difference between honoring Diana and absorbing her memory. Eleanor Harcourt opened the file and explained that the estate was controlled by an independent trustee board, a private body legally separated from the crown. Neither marriage, protocol, nor royal rank could change the named beneficiaries. William's stewardship carried equally strict limits. He served as temporary guardian because he was Diana's eldest son and the father of George, Charlotte, and Louis. His authority would end when each child received the portion assigned under the estate timetable, the schedule governing when protected assets passed to their beneficiaries. The prince could defend the structure, but even he could not rewrite it. Charles asked the question everyone feared. Could Camilla be granted an honorary preservation role without receiving ownership or control? Eleanor answered no. The king pressed both palms against the table and remained silent. No royal command could rescue him from that humiliating truth. Harcourt softened her tone, telling him the restriction had not been written to humiliate his wife. It existed to stop Diana's identity from being administratively merged with any later royal marriage. Then the supplementary note was read. Diana had stated that her children's future families should inherit her private story without reinterpretation by those whose position may be shaped by the circumstances of my departure. Charles lowered his head. He admitted that advisors had warned him years earlier about protective boundaries, yet he had never seen the full wording. He had not understood that the safeguard extended to memorial authority, ceremonial display, and even symbolic oversight. The trustees delivered the final warning. If the palace continued resisting, the complete clause could be disclosed to defend the board's decision. Charles would then face a brutal choice: protect Camilla's dignity or prevent the past from being dragged into public judgment once again. The law had removed Charles's ability to change the outcome, yet it left him with a more painful form of power: the choice between shielding his wife from humiliation and shielding the monarchy from another battle over Diana. By the following morning, the decision had changed the rhythm of the palace. Camilla canceled 2 engagements connected to royal heritage. William requested additional security for the estate collection, and Charles refused to approve a prepared statement. Staff members who had spent years avoiding comparisons between the 2 women were suddenly forced to choose their language carefully. Every corridor conversation carried the same fear. If the full restriction became public, old loyalties would return with devastating force. Camilla acted first. She removed a visit to a textile conservation workshop from her diary, because several pieces connected to Diana were due to be discussed there. Her private secretary watched the Queen draw one firm line through the engagement, then another. Royal heritage meant the preservation of objects, traditions, and records tied to the monarchy. But on that morning, the phrase felt painfully personal. She had been asked to celebrate history while being denied any place inside its most sensitive chapter. William responded with equal speed. He authorized selected objects to be transferred into a protected family archive, a secure collection kept apart from ordinary palace holdings, and required approval from 2 trustees before anything could be accessed. Catherine understood why he acted, yet she warned that George and Charlotte were old enough to sense the tension. The princess feared that a legacy created from love would become another source of bitterness for the children it was meant to protect. William listened, but he would not weaken the safeguards. Charles finally faced Camilla alone. The king told her he would not challenge the trustees in court because legal action would expose Diana's private words and place George, Charlotte, and Louis at the center of a public fight. Camilla waited until he left, then admitted to her secretary that the title of queen could not protect her from being remembered as the outsider. The empty chair opposite her seemed to confirm it. Danger was already moving beyond the palace. A confidential scheduling note containing the phrase, "Diana beneficiary restriction," reached a newspaper editor, who began calling staff before any official statement existed. The leak transformed private sorrow into a countdown. Camilla did not demand another legal briefing. Instead, she sent William a short written request for one final meeting, without Charles, trustees, advisors, or documents. This time, she wanted no defense prepared and no witness present. William read it twice, sensing her anger had shifted into something far less predictable. The first confrontation had been about blame, but Camilla's second request carried no legal argument at all, suggesting that she had finally understood the estate could not be won, and that something more personal now had to be surrendered. There were no trustees in the room when Camilla met William again. No sealed folders. No prepared statements. She had asked for privacy because she no longer intended to fight the decision. Sitting opposite the man whose childhood had been shaped by Diana's death, she acknowledged something the palace had avoided saying aloud. Her presence had always complicated his mother's memory. William expected another defense. Instead, Camilla asked only what Diana's grandchildren would eventually be told about the inheritance. Camilla had chosen Sandringham because it belonged to neither argument. Away from Windsor's legal offices and the royal apartments tied to Charles, she and William could speak without titles doing the work for them. The future king explained that George, Charlotte, and Louis would receive the estate gradually. Letters, objects, and duties would pass to them at different stages, with each child taught why Diana had kept the collection outside the crown's general property, meaning assets controlled for the monarchy rather than for one private family line. Camilla listened without interruption. Then she admitted the truth she had resisted from the beginning. She had never been devastated by losing possessions that were not hers. What had broken her was the message behind the exclusion. History would always measure her against the pain surrounding Diana, no matter how faithfully she served. William did not soften the boundary, but his anger eased. He told her that protecting his mother's estate was not an attempt to destroy Camilla. Forgiveness, he said, could exist without surrender. Personal peace did not require him to erase the safeguards Diana had deliberately placed around her children and grandchildren. Camilla made one final offer. She proposed a public statement confirming that the inheritance belonged only to George, Charlotte, and Louis, and promising that her household would never seek control, access, or ceremonial association with it. William refused the statement for now, fearing it would deepen the spectacle, but he allowed one private gesture. Camilla could write a letter to the children, explaining that she respected the trustees' decision. It would remain sealed until they reached adulthood. For once, William saw not Diana's rival, but a woman accepting a boundary she could never change alone. When Camilla returned to Charles, she gave him no legal argument and no demand for defense. She simply said, "I will not ask you to fight William." The king understood that the private battle had ended, just as the public one was beginning. Camilla's surrender prevented a constitutional struggle inside the family. Yet the leaked summary had already crossed the palace gates, and by sunrise, Diana's protected legacy belonged not only to her grandchildren, but to the judgment of the public. The story broke beneath a photograph of Diana smiling beside a young William. Across the front page ran 6 words: "Her legacy belongs to her grandchildren." Within hours, broadcasters were debating the Trustees clause. Crowds gathered at Kensington Palace, and white roses appeared along the gates. Camilla watched the coverage from a private room, while William asked staff to turn the television down. Neither of them could control what the announcement had awakened in the public imagination. The headline reached Camilla before the palace statement did. Her secretary placed the newspaper beside her breakfast tray, and the Queen read the words twice before folding the page with deliberate care. She said the public had already decided what the ruling meant. To them, Diana had reached across time to protect George, Charlotte, and Louis, while Camilla had been placed outside that final act of love. William felt no triumph. At Kensington, he learned that families were leaving white roses at the gates in Diana's memory. The prince was grateful that the bond between his mother and his children had been understood, yet he also felt the old sadness returning. A private inheritance had become a national reckoning, and George and Charlotte were now old enough to hear the questions surrounding it. Charles authorized a brief statement. It confirmed that the independent trustees, a private board legally separate from the crown, would retain control, and that William would safeguard the estate without interference from the sovereign's household. The wording was careful, but broadcasters pushed further. One national program called The Inheritance, a final protected bridge from Diana to the grandchildren she never lived to meet. The public wanted more. Commentators demanded the hidden wording of the restriction, arguing that full disclosure would reveal why Camilla had been excluded. William feared that Diana's most personal explanation would become public ammunition. The pressure grew by the hour. Then Camilla made the choice no one expected. Through Charles, she asked the trustees not to release the supplementary note, even though secrecy would leave her facing harsher judgment. The king understood the sacrifice immediately. She was protecting Diana's privacy at the cost of defending her own reputation. William learned of the request through a documented trustee message and sent Camilla a handwritten note of thanks. It was brief, but it carried what years of formal peace had failed to express: recognition. For Camilla, that quiet gratitude mattered more than public vindication. The public had embraced the inheritance as Diana's final gift to her grandchildren, but the private exchange between William and Camilla revealed the deeper verdict. The estate would remain divided from her forever, while the family itself no longer had to be. The final decision did not give Camilla the place she had once hoped to hold. Diana's estate remained protected for George, Charlotte, and Louis, with William responsible for delivering every object, letter, and memory according to the trustees' instructions. Yet the outcome produced something no legal challenge could have achieved. Camilla stopped fighting the boundary. William stopped interpreting every question as an attack, and Charles finally accepted that preserving peace required allowing 2 royal legacies to remain permanently separate. The trustees recorded the settlement. Their final confirmation stated that the beneficiaries could not be changed, the estate could never be absorbed into the crown, and no spouse of Charles could control its objects, funds, archives, or memorial decisions. The crown meant authority attached to the monarchy, but Diana's estate would remain private. William signed 3 stewardship records. Stewardship meant temporary legal responsibility, not ownership. George would receive his part personally. Charlotte would receive hers under the same protection. Louis would inherit without competing with either sibling. The prince understood that dividing the legacy allowed each child to know Diana directly, rather than through one royal collection. Camilla returned to the trustees for one final meeting. She requested no title, privilege, or symbolic role. The Queen stated that her household would respect the arrangement and never approach the estate again. Eleanor Harcourt recorded the promise, then closed the file. Camilla's surrender carried no triumph, yet it held dignity without possession. Charles later spoke to William alone. The king admitted that protecting Diana's bond with the children was not disloyalty to him. He regretted needing a crisis to understand why his son required certainty instead of compromise. William accepted the words because both men knew how much pain had been required to reach them. Camilla completed her letter to George, Charlotte, and Louis. She wrote that their grandmother's possessions had been protected through love, and that respecting those boundaries was the only honorable choice. William did not read it. He sealed the letter beside Diana's archive, trusting his children to form their own judgment later. The estate became more than an inheritance. It was a protected relationship between a grandmother and 3 grandchildren. Camilla found no victory there, only acceptance. And acceptance ended the monarchy's habit of treating memory as a competition. Diana's legacy remained exactly where she intended it to remain, with William's children, while Camilla walked away not as its custodian or beneficiary, but as the woman who finally understood that respecting another person's place in history was the only way to secure her own. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in